The old coat was still hanging in my bedroom closet after all these years, as I lay dying from lung cancer in my Boston home. And with my final breaths, I had to confess the most evil thing I'd ever done. My nephew Tommy was sitting beside my bed when I grabbed his shirt with my last strength and whispered the words that would destroy him. Tommy. That night 18 years ago, when Vincent Romano killed your son. It wasn't an accident. I gave little Michael my coat to wear because I knew Vincent was coming for me. I used your innocent boy as a human shield, and I've been watching you and Vincent cry together over his grave ever since. The color drained from Tommy's face as he realized his best friend had spent 18 years in prison for a murder I had orchestrated, and that his own uncle had deliberately caused his son's death. Before I continue my story, I really want to know where you're watching me from. Tell me in the comments what city you're watching from, and if you can, please leave a like and subscribe to the channel. My name is Frank Anthony Castellano, and I'm dying in my house in Boston's North End, finally confessing to the most cowardly act of revenge anyone could imagine. 18 years ago, I manipulated two men into destroying each other's lives because I was too much of a coward to face my enemy myself. It all started in 2005 when I was 57 years old and running a small construction company in South Boston. My business partner was my nephew Tommy Rossini, whose 8-year-old son Michael was the light of both our lives. Michael would come to the job sites after school, wearing a little hard hat and following us around, dreaming of becoming a builder like his dad and Uncle Frank. Everything was perfect until Vincent Romano entered our lives. Vincent was a rival contractor who had been trying to muscle in on our territory for months. We'd bid against each other on several major projects, and the competition had gotten increasingly hostile. Vincent had connections with some dangerous people, not quite organized crime, but close enough that crossing him could be deadly. The breaking point came when we underbid Vincent on a $2 million city renovation project. It was the biggest contract either of us had ever been offered, and losing it meant the difference between prosperity and bankruptcy for both our companies. 3 days after the city announced we'd won the bid, Vincent confronted me outside my favorite restaurant in Little Italy. "Frank Castellano," he said, stepping out of the shadows as I walked to my car. "You think you're real smart, don't you?" "Vincent, it's just business. No hard feelings." "No hard feelings?" Vincent's voice was ice cold. "You cost me $2 million and probably my business. You think I'm just going to let that slide?" I could see the rage in his eyes, and I knew this wasn't just about money anymore. Vincent felt humiliated, and dangerous men like him don't handle humiliation well. "What do you want, Vincent?" "The deal's done. The contracts are signed." "I want you to remember this conversation," he said, stepping closer, "because payback is coming, Frank. When you least expect it, when you think you're safe, I'm going to make you pay for what you did to me." That threat changed everything. For the next 3 months, I lived in constant fear, looking over my shoulder, checking my car for bombs, varying my routes home. Vincent had made it clear that he was planning something, but I didn't know when or how he would strike. Then I learned something that gave me a twisted opportunity for revenge. Vincent's best friend since childhood was my nephew Tommy. They had grown up in the same neighborhood, played baseball together, been each other's best men at their weddings. Despite the business rivalry between Vincent and me, Tommy and Vincent had maintained their friendship, meeting for drinks every Friday night and attending each other's family gatherings. Tommy had no idea that Vincent was planning to kill me. To him, Vincent was just his oldest friend, who happened to be in business competition with his uncle. Tommy thought he could stay neutral in our conflict and maintain relationships with both of us. But I saw an opportunity to destroy Vincent in the most devastating way possible. If Vincent was going to try to kill me, I would make sure he killed the wrong person, someone whose death would haunt him for the rest of his life. The plan I developed was so evil that I still can't believe I went through with it. I knew that Vincent was planning to ambush me on my way home from work one evening. I had noticed him following me, studying my routines, and I overheard him asking mutual acquaintances about my schedule. He was clearly planning something for a night when the streets would be dark and empty. What Vincent didn't know was that I had figured out his plan, and I was going to use his own friendship with Tommy against him. On the night of November 15th, 2005, I convinced Tommy to let me take Michael to a late movie. It was a school night, which made Tommy hesitant, but I insisted it was important uncle-nephew bonding time. Come on, Tommy. The kid's been begging me to take him to see that new superhero movie. One late night won't kill him. I don't know, Uncle Frank. It's a school night, and Maria will be mad if he's tired tomorrow. I'll have him home by 10. Besides, when's the next time I'll be free to spend time with him? We're starting that big project next week. Tommy finally agreed, and at 7 p.m., I picked up Michael from their house in Southie. He was so excited, chattering about the movie and asking if we could get popcorn and candy. He was wearing his favorite jacket, a small version of the navy blue peacoat that I always wore to work. But we never went to the movies. Instead, I drove Michael to my house and told him we needed to make a quick stop before the theater. Once inside, I convinced him to put on my full-size peacoat over his jacket. Michael, I want you to wear Uncle Frank's special coat tonight. It'll keep you extra warm, and you'll look just like a real construction boss. Michael was delighted. The coat was huge on his small frame, hanging down to his ankles, but he felt so grown up wearing it. He paraded around my living room, pretending to give orders to imaginary construction workers. Do I really look like you, Uncle Frank? You look exactly like me, kid. Anyone who saw you from behind would think you were Uncle Frank himself. That was exactly what I was counting on. At 8:30 p.m., I told Michael we needed to walk to the corner store to get candy before the movie. The store was 6 blocks from my house, down the same dimly lit street I always took when walking home from work. In 2005, that part of Boston still had old-style street lighting, widely spaced lampposts that created long stretches of darkness between pools of yellow light. On a November evening, visibility was limited, and someone lying in wait would have to rely on silhouettes and general shapes to identify their target. Michael walked beside me, chattering excitedly about the movie we were supposedly going to see, completely unaware that I was leading him into a death trap meant for me. When we were 3 blocks from the store, I stopped suddenly and smacked my forehead dramatically. Oh no, Michael. I forgot my wallet back at the house. I can't buy candy or movie tickets without it. Should we go back and get it, Uncle Frank? You know what? Why don't you keep walking to the store and look at all the candy while I run back for my wallet? I'll catch up to you in 5 minutes, and then we can buy whatever you want. Michael was 8 years old and trusted me completely. The idea of browsing candy aisles by himself seemed like an adventure, not a danger. Okay, Uncle Frank, I'll pick out the best candy for both of us. I watched him skip down the dark street, my oversized peacoat billowing around his small frame, looking exactly like me from behind in the dim light. Then I turned and ran back toward my house, taking a different route so I wouldn't be seen. If this story is shocking you, hit that subscribe button because what happened next destroyed 3 families and sent an innocent man to prison for 18 years. 10 minutes later, I heard the gunshots. Vincent Romano had been waiting in the alley beside Murphy's Tavern, the same spot where he'd ambushed other people before. When he saw a figure in my distinctive navy peacoat walking down the street at the time I usually headed home, he stepped out of the shadows and opened fire. 3 shots to the chest, fired at close range in the darkness. By the time Vincent realized he had killed an 8-year-old child instead of me, it was too late. Michael Rossini lay dying on the sidewalk, my enormous coat soaked with his blood, while Vincent stood over him in absolute horror. "Jesus Christ," Vincent whispered, staring down at the little boy he had just murdered. "Jesus Christ, what have I done?" Vincent's screams of anguish brought people running from nearby houses and businesses. Within minutes, the street was filled with neighbors, police sirens, and paramedics trying desperately to save Michael's life. But there was nothing anyone could do. Michael died on the way to the hospital, clutching a handful of candy money in his small fist. The first person the police called was Tommy, to tell him his son had been murdered. The second person they called was me, to tell me that my nephew's child had been killed while wearing my coat. When I arrived at the crime scene, I found Vincent sitting on the curb in handcuffs, sobbing uncontrollably. Tommy was kneeling in the street beside the chalk outline of his son's body, wailing with a grief so profound it was inhuman. "Vincent, why?" Tommy kept asking his best friend. "Why did you kill my son? He was just a little boy. He never hurt anyone." Vincent looked up at Tommy with eyes full of horror and confusion. I thought it was Frank. I saw the coat. I saw the silhouette. Oh God, Tommy, I thought I was killing Frank." That's when both of them looked at me, standing there in my shirt sleeves, very much alive, while Michael lay dead in my coat. The two of them realized simultaneously that Michael had died because of the war between Vincent and me. Tommy had lost his son because his best friend was trying to kill his uncle. Vincent had murdered the child of his closest friend because he was trying to commit a completely different murder. And there I stood, watching both of them cry over the body of a little boy who had died in my place. "Frank," Tommy said, his voice breaking, "Michael was wearing your coat. Vincent was trying to kill you, wasn't he?" I nodded, playing the role of the innocent victim who had narrowly escaped death. "I'm so sorry, Tommy. If I had known Vincent was planning this, if I had any idea he would hurt Michael." Vincent was charged with first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison. At his trial, he tried to explain that the killing was a case of mistaken identity, that he had been trying to kill me, not Michael. But the prosecutor argued that murdering a child was even more heinous than murdering an adult, and Vincent's defense actually made his sentence harsher. The defendant claims he intended to commit a different murder, the prosecutor told the jury. This does not absolve him of responsibility for the murder he actually committed. Vincent Romano is a cold-blooded killer who destroyed an innocent family. Vincent was sentenced to life without parole. He served 18 years before dying of a heart attack in prison just last month, still insisting to anyone who would listen that Michael's death was a tragic mistake. But the real tragedy was what the murder did to Tommy. My nephew never recovered from losing Michael. The combination of grief over his son's death and guilt over his friendship with the killer destroyed him psychologically. He blamed himself for maintaining a relationship with Vincent, despite the business conflict, convinced that his loyalty to his friend had somehow enabled his son's murder. "I should have known," Tommy would say during his darkest moments. "Vincent was my best friend. I should have seen the signs that he was planning something violent." Tommy's marriage fell apart within 2 years. His wife Maria couldn't handle his depression and his obsession with Michael's death. She moved back to Italy with her parents, leaving Tommy alone with his guilt and grief. Tommy also blamed me, though not for the reasons he should have. He thought I was partially responsible for Michael's death because my business rivalry with Vincent had created the conditions for the murder. He was right, but he had no idea how right he was. "Uncle Frank, why did you have to take that contract from Vincent?" Tommy asked me repeatedly over the years. "If you had just let him have that one job, Michael would still be alive." "I know, Tommy. I think about that every day. But I never imagined Vincent would hurt an innocent child." For 18 years, I watched Tommy destroy himself with guilt, while Vincent rotted in prison for a murder I had orchestrated. I attended Michael's funeral, consoled Tommy during his darkest moments, and played the role of the grieving uncle who had lost his beloved nephew. But the truth was eating me alive from the inside. Every year on the anniversary of Michael's death, Tommy and I would visit his grave together. Tommy would leave flowers and toys, talking to his son about baseball games and school events that Michael would never experience. "I'm sorry I couldn't protect you, Michael," Tommy would whisper to the headstone. "I'm sorry Uncle Frank's coat couldn't save you." Those words were like knives in my chest, but I deserved every moment of pain. Last month, when Vincent died in prison, Tommy called me crying. "Uncle Frank, Vincent is dead. He died still claiming that killing Michael was a mistake, that he was really trying to kill you. Do you think there's any chance he was telling the truth?" "I don't know, Tommy. Vincent was a dangerous man. Maybe he convinced himself it was an accident to make the guilt easier to bear." But Tommy's question forced me to confront what I had done. Vincent had died in prison, branded as a child killer, never able to convince anyone that Michael's death was a case of mistaken identity. Tommy had spent 18 years blaming himself for his son's death, and Michael had died because I was too cowardly to face my enemy myself. When my lung cancer diagnosis came 6 weeks ago, I knew I was going to die with this secret. The doctors gave me 2 months, maybe 3, if I was lucky. I could have taken the truth to my grave. Tommy would have continued believing that Vincent was a monster who had deliberately murdered a child. Vincent was already dead, so confessing wouldn't change his fate. Michael was gone, and nothing I said could bring him back. But I couldn't die knowing that Tommy was living with undeserved guilt, and that Vincent had died believing everyone thought he was a child killer. Yesterday, when Tommy was visiting me for what we both knew would be the last time, I told him everything. "Tommy, I need to confess something about the night Michael died. I knew Vincent was planning to kill me. I deliberately put Michael in my coat and sent him walking down that street because I wanted Vincent to kill him instead of me." The silence that followed was the most horrible moment of my life. I watched Tommy's face change as he processed what I had just told him, that his beloved uncle had murdered his son, just as surely as if I had pulled the trigger myself. "You used my son as bait," Tommy whispered. "I was scared, Tommy. I knew Vincent was going to kill me, and I panicked. I thought if he killed someone else by mistake, it would destroy him and save me. You killed my son." Tommy's voice was getting louder. "You murdered my 8-year-old boy to save your own life. I never thought Vincent would actually go through with it. I thought maybe he would realize his mistake at the last second, or miss his shot, or—" "You killed my son!" Tommy screamed, standing up and backing away from my bed. "You killed Michael, and you let me blame myself for 18 years. Tommy, please. Vincent wasn't a monster. You are. Vincent thought he was killing his enemy in a fair fight. You used an innocent child as a human shield. Tommy was right, of course. Vincent had committed murder. But I had committed something worse. I had deliberately sacrificed a child to save myself, then spent 18 years watching the consequences destroy everyone around me. I'm sorry, Tommy. I know sorry isn't enough, but I needed you to know the truth before I die. Sorry? Tommy laughed bitterly. You're sorry? My son is dead. My marriage is destroyed. My best friend died in prison thinking everyone believed he was a child killer. And you're sorry? What can I do to make this right? Nothing. There's nothing you can do. Michael is dead, Vincent is dead, and my life has been a lie for 18 years. There's no making this right. Tommy left my house that night, and I haven't seen him since. I'm dying alone, which is what I deserve. Frank Anthony Castellano died at 4:17 a.m. on a Wednesday morning, alone in his Boston home, taking his guilt to the grave, but finally having told the truth about Michael Rossini's murder. Tommy Rossini held a press conference the day after his uncle's death, revealing Frank's confession and demanding that Vincent Romano's criminal record be corrected to reflect the true circumstances of Michael's death. Vincent Romano was not a child killer, Tommy told the gathered reporters. He was a man who made a terrible mistake while trying to kill his business rival. My uncle Frank Castellano was the real monster in this story. He used my 8-year-old son as a human shield and let an innocent man die in prison, branded as something he wasn't. Vincent and I were best friends for 30 years before my son's death. I spent 18 years hating him for something my own uncle manipulated him into doing. Frank destroyed 3 families with his cowardice, and I hope this confession brings some peace to Vincent's memory. The Massachusetts State Police reopened the Michael Rossini case and officially reclassified it as a murder conspiracy, with Frank Castellano listed as the primary perpetrator and Vincent Romano listed as an unknowing accomplice. While Vincent's conviction could not be overturned posthumously, the record now reflects the true circumstances of the crime. Tommy used Frank's confession to establish the Michael Rossini Foundation, which provides support for families of children killed in cases of mistaken identity or gang violence. The foundation's mission statement reads, Michael Rossini died because adults chose violence over communication, revenge over forgiveness, and cowardice over courage. We honor his memory by helping other families affected by senseless violence find healing and justice. The foundation also advocates for prison reform and wrongful conviction cases inspired by Vincent Romano's 18 years of imprisonment for a crime he never intended to commit. At Vincent Romano's memorial service, held 18 years after his imprisonment and attended by hundreds of people who had come to understand the true story, Tommy gave a eulogy that brought everyone to tears. Vincent Romano was my best friend, and I abandoned him when he needed me most. I believed the worst about him instead of fighting for the truth. He died in prison, thinking that everyone, including me, believed he was a monster who deliberately killed children. Vincent made a terrible mistake that night, but it was a mistake born from anger, not evil. My Uncle Frank made a calculated decision to sacrifice my son's life for his own. There's a difference between a moment of rage and a plan of cowardice. I forgive Vincent for killing my son because I understand now that he thought he was killing someone else. I will never forgive my uncle for using Michael as bait, because that was a choice made with full knowledge of the consequences. Michael would have been 26 years old today. He wanted to be a construction worker like his dad and Uncle Frank. Instead, he became the victim of a war between adults who should have known better. I'm sorry, Vincent. I'm sorry I didn't fight harder to understand what really happened. I'm sorry you died thinking I hated you. And I'm sorry my son paid the price for my uncle's evil. Share this story if it moved you. Because sometimes the real monsters are the people we trust most. And sometimes the people we hate are victims of manipulation, just like we are. Truth and justice win, always.